Okay, we'll probably give people a few more minutes here. Okay, so we're probably good to start now. Thank you everyone for joining. Today we have Vanitha Kartha, and she will be providing an update on the Colorado River Basin hydrology and its impacts on drought and shortage. Her presentation will address how shortage on the Colorado River impacts Central Arizona project supplies, along with action steps being taken to address these challenges. She is the Colorado River Programs Manager at Central Arizona Project. She has more than a decade of experience working on water management and natural resource issues. She has previously worked for Freeport McMoran as their water resource manager, addressing water rights management issues for Freeport mines in Arizona. Prior to that, she served as manager for the Colorado River Management Section at the Arizona Department of Water Resources. Okay, Vanitha, thank you so much for joining us here and giving this presentation. I will hand this off to you, but I still have the slides up here.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be giving you a presentation today. It has been a strange time in the Colorado River Basin, so I am happy to see a number of people interested in this very important matter. Next slide, please. So, as Jackie mentioned, I work for the Central Arizona Project. I have been working in the Colorado River Basin for almost 12, 13 years now. Most of it has been with the Arizona Department of Water Resources, primarily starting with them as an environmental planner, and then ending that part of my life as the manager of the Colorado River section. And then I had a brief stint at Freeport, and then currently I'm with Central Arizona Project. So Central Arizona Project delivers Colorado River water. It is Arizona's single largest source of renewable water supply to Maricopa, Pinal, and Pima counties. So as you may all know, more than 80% of the population live in Central Arizona, where Colorado River water is delivered through CAP. The project itself is an engineering feat, about 336 miles long, a large system of aqueducts, tunnels, pumping plants, and pipelines. You already probably know this, but I like to always give an introduction. Next slide, please, Jackie. As I mentioned, Colorado River water is the largest renewable supply water for Arizona, but we also share it with 6 other basin states and with the Republic of Mexico. The river sustains some of the largest cities in the United States: Phoenix, LA, Las Vegas, San Diego, Salt Lake City. The river also supplies water to around 30 tribes, irrigates more than 5 million acres of farmland, and includes 60 million acre feet of capacity or storage capacity, and generates clean hydropower for the Western power grid. Today, we'll be talking about 2 of those largest reservoirs a lot, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, because those are the largest reservoirs on the system and stores a lot of water for all of the basin states and Mexico. Next slide, please. As you just saw, Colorado River is very important for the sustenance of the Southwestern United States. And recently, it has been in the news for some very wrong reasons. You must have heard about the shrinking Lake Mead, about the very first shortage declaration, and more recently, actually, I think it was maybe like last week or 2 weeks ago, about Lake Powell reaching historically critical elevation that it has never reached before. I think Powell went below 3525 2 days ago, and it is somewhat of a new territory for reclamation that operates at reservoir. They have never operated Lake Powell below 3525 past the 1960s when Glenkin and Dam actually closed. So it's new for reclamation, it's new for all of us. We are really entering some uncharted territory here. So let's move to the next slide. And why should we care? You all are water managers. You all probably know that Arizona receives 40%, almost 40% of its water supply from Colorado. It is shown as 36 in that chart because we have been conserving a lot of water in Lake Mead. And when this Lake Mead, which is our main storage for both Arizona and California and Nevada, when it shrinks, it most definitely impacts the water supply. Moreover, the water that flows down the Cap Canal has one of the lowest priorities in the Colorado River system. As you can see in the bar chart on the right, the large like green block that you see is priority 4. It's one of the lowest priorities on the river system. There is priority 5, there's priority 6, but that gets cut, of course, immediately. But priority 4, as priority 4, we take the largest cut in the state of Arizona. CAP users take the largest cut in the state of Arizona. So what is the prognosis for shortages, as you can see? And just so you know, as Lake Mead shrinks, that block, that big green block, it gets smaller and smaller. So we're trying not to get there. So let's see what the prognosis is for shortages. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing here is a historic unregulated inflow into Lake Powell. We have had some really good years in the 1980s and even mid-1990s. Our average for the past 30 years, that is from 1990 all the way to 2020, was about 9.6 million acre feet. But over the last 20 years, it has gone down by 1 million acre feet. It's a downward trend. And really, it's shaping up to be one of the worst periods of drought that the Southwest US has ever faced. 2021, last year, or water year 2021, was the second worst unregulated inflow into Lake Powell, only dwarfed by water year 2022, and with water year 1977 coming up a close third. Looking forward, the most probable inflow that you see in the green bar is right now around 6.58. So when I created this PowerPoint, that was yesterday. Actually, I should have updated the inflows, but I only used the February because I didn't have time to update this chart. So please forgive me, but do know that in March, the March beginning, the unregulated inflow was updated and it has actually gone down from what you see here. So right now, the most probable inflow is around 6.58, a decrease from the number that you are seeing here. The minimum probable as of March is about 5.24, which is also a decrease from what you see here from the February projections. So it's just a slight decrease in mid-February. We were really worried because it kind of went down a little drastically, but we had some good storms at the end of February, and that has helped us slightly. But we are nowhere close to some really good years with a large snowpack. The difference this year, that is in 2022, from water year 2002 and water year 1977, was that we were coming off of some really wet years, right? When we started the drought in 2000, we were coming off of some really good wet years. This year and the last few years, we haven't had the fortune of having a really amazing snowpack in a while. Next slide, please. So, we have been resourceful. We have some really good reservoirs on the system. But as you can see, there was a precipitous decline in combined storage of Mead and Powell in the early 2000s. So we were in really good capacity, but our reservoirs were practically full leading into those dry years. As of now, though, we haven't been as lucky, and our reservoirs haven't had the time to recover fully from that decline in the early 2000s. And we continue to decline further after the sequential dry years over the past 2 decades. So let's go to the next slide. So what have we been doing? The federal government and the basin states have been working together over the past 2 decades to protect these reservoirs, especially Mead and Powell, from falling into critical elevations. The secretary adopted 2007 guidelines. So I just wanted to warn you, this is just an overview, and I'll kind of slightly go into detail and try not to bore you with technicalities and such. But essentially, the federal government and basin states adopted the 2007 guidelines after the basin experienced some of the worst drought conditions. That is the beginning of the 2000s. And after the adoption of the guidelines, the basin states and the federal government worked with the Republic of Mexico to execute a minute to the 1944 water treaty. As you know, we have a water treaty with Mexico. And as we add minutes, those are supplements to that treaty without modifying the substantive terms of the treaty. So following a devastating earthquake in 2010, Mexico and the United States signed Minute 318, which basically allowed Mexico to store its unused water in the US reservoirs for delivery in the future. Minute 319 was signed in 2012, expanding some of those provisions of Minute 318. And finally, in 2017, I think we signed Minute 323, extending the provisions of Minute 319, including storage in US reservoirs, and also adding some additional conservation projects to make water available to funding entities. In this case, funding entities are Met Metropolitan Water District of California, SNWA in Nevada, and Central Arizona Project. And you all probably heard this in 2019. There was a lot of news about this. The basin states and the federal government executed a third plan, which is called the Drought Contingency Plan. It had two terms, Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan and also the Upper Basin Drought Contingency Plan. And this was to protect both Meade and Powell from falling into critical elevations by taking actions to take additional reductions and conserving further. And very recently, as of December 2021, we signed a memorandum of understanding for the 500 plus plan to protect Lake Meade from falling into elevation 1020. So let's go to the next slide. So what have these agreements done? These agreements that I just talked about in the past slide and all the conservation actions resulting from those agreements since 2007 have propped Lake Meade up by almost 65 feet. If it weren't for these conservation actions, Meade would have been at 1,000 elevation. So we have been really doing some giant conservation actions to keep Lake Meade propped up to this level. So the takeaway from this slide is that conservation actions do work. We are still trying to fight against drought. Drought cannot be fixed, but here what we are doing is we are trying to control our demand and trying to kind of stay away any hard reductions to the states in the future. So next slide, please. So I'll stop here for a minute because I know I speak really fast before I get into details, and I'm not going to go into too many details. I just want to stop and see if anyone has any questions. Okay, good. So, so the 2007 guidelines. So through the 2007 guidelines, Arizona is to take reductions when Lake Meade is projected to be at 1075, at 1050 elevation or 1025, and basically progressing into larger cuts as Lake Meade falls farther below. So the guidelines was a very novel approach, right? It started to incentivize conservation by creating intentionally created surplus. It's very valuable water. It's a tool that we use a lot, both Arizona and California, and also Nevada. We have we have a 2.7 limit account in Lake Meade, and Arizona is close to, or actually over 500,000 acre feet as of this year. And California is somewhere around 1.2 million acre feet, and Nevada has also exceeded its annual limit. So we have been really using our conserving water to create ICS. Next slide, please. So the drought contingency plan caused additional reductions to Lake Meade, with Arizona taking an additional 192,000. This is on top of the mandatory shortage reductions that were implemented through the 2007 guidelines, but the 192,000 comes at a higher elevation Lake Meade. So we take that reduction when Lake Meade is projected to be at 1090. Nevada has also joined in. California has joined in here with the drought contingency plan, taking additional cuts when Lake Meade falls to 1045, otherwise known as Tier 2B. Mexico also takes additional reductions through a plan called the Binational Water Scarcity Contingency Plan. Next slide, please. So the DCP was extremely complicated for Arizona. It required several agreements, most of them very sophisticated and complex among several parties to bring the whole drought contingency plan to fruition. This was a huge collaborative effort with participation from literally everybody in Arizona, with tribes, Bureau of Reclamation, DWR, Central Arizona Project, Salt River Project, municipalities, industrial folks from Central Arizona, the Arizona Water Banking Authority, and Central Arizona Agriculture. It's a convoluted, complicated mishmash of agreements that somehow really works. So let's go to the next slide. I'm not going into detail on how each of these works. That's a presentation by itself. So last year in December 2021, the Basin states signed a memorandum of understanding for the 500+ plan. The idea is to conserve 500,000 acre-feet in Lake Mead over the next few years to protect Mead from falling to an elevation of 1020. So when we were signing the DCP agreements, there was a clause in those agreements that said that if Lake Mead was projected to be at 1030 or below, Reclamation would consult, or Department of Interior would consult with the lower basin states. And so this was a result of those consultations. We came up with a plan to try and protect Lake Mead from falling to 1020. Arizona's target reduction towards this 500+ plan is just over 200,000, about 233, 235. All of it is voluntary, all of it is compensated and temporary. We are currently working on implementing this memorandum of understanding. We have participants both on river and within the CAP service area. 2 agreements have already been executed, the GRIC, the Gila River Indian Community, through system conservation, and also creating some intentionally created surplus. Both the GRIC's contributions add to about 130,000 acre-feet in Lake Mead. We also have around 35,000 acre-feet from the Central Arizona municipalities. And as of now, we are working with the Colorado River Indian tribes, with the Mojave Valley Irrigation Drainage District, with the Yuma Mesa Irrigation and Drainage District, and the Walton Mohawk Irrigation and Drainage District to execute following agreements with those parties. We took the MVIDD substantial form of agreement to our CAP board in March, and we are continuing to work on the rest of the agreements. So let's go to the next slide. So this is a table that is probably very familiar to you all. We presented this at the last board meeting. It is a really good overview of the conservation we have done so far in the state of Arizona. What is new this time is the red letters. So those red alphabets are basically for any contributions towards a 500+ plan. As you can see, the GRIC system conservation of what 51,000 is already in. The crit system conservation of potential 4,685 in 2022 is in. The GRIC's ICS of 40,000 is already in. Also CWCD's 3,500 back from 2021. So cumulatively, we have conserved almost 300,000 acre-feet over the past 3 years. And in 2022, we are well on our way to conserving almost 500,000 acre-feet. And this will be about a mandatory 325,000 tier 1 shortage reduction. So just a caveat, this does not include any of the other agreements that we are working on, the Walton Mohawk or the Yuma Mesa Irrigation Drainage District. Yeah, so those are not yet included. And I want to say the municipalities are not included either. So there might be some additional information coming in the future. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what I just talked to you so far was everything that has been occurring in the past and what actions we have taken so far. Let's look to the future. So our snowpack, and I did this on March 14th. And as of today, we haven't moved much. I think this morning it was at 95% of the snow water equivalent. So it is still below average, even with the very wet December that we had, but that was really the only wet part in this snow accumulation season. We have had a very dry November. We had a very dry January. We had a partially dry February, but those first 2 weeks of February was really dry. Even if we had a even if we were to have a good snowpack in March or the rest of the March or in April, the inflows into the reservoirs may be impacted by the dry soil conditions that existed in November in the upper basin, meaning we may not get an equivalent inflow or inflow equivalent to the snowpack. So even though it may be at 100, we may not get a similar volume of inflow coming into Lake Powell because of the very dry conditions that are antecedent in the basin in 2021. So let's go to the next slide. So that was a snowpack, and I don't know how familiar you are with the 5-year projections. Reclamation runs the CRSS model and publishes a 5-year projections in January, in April, and then also in August. But this year, what they did was they changed their models. They used to run CRSS, and this time, because of changing conditions, they have been using the Colorado River midterm modeling system. It basically follows an ensemble stream flow projection. And the change here is that now we are starting to use the 1991 through 2020 hydrology. Those are the drier set. It still is not the driest, but it's drier than even the stress test, or definitely drier than the observed hydrology and so on. So what you're seeing here, without going into too much detail, in this case, black is bad, blue is excellent. Basically, if you see a lot of black, if you see a lot of red, that means we are dry, right? So when you start to see this 100%, that means we are in a mid-elevation release tier. When you are in a mid-elevation release tier, Lake Powell releases somewhere between 748 to 823. If you're in black, it could be anywhere between 7 million acre feet all the way to 9.5, depending on how the balancing works. If you're in equalization, which is in the blue, that you start to see in the later years, you get a lot of water, but that also equates to a lot of snowpack, which we haven't seen. So remember, you're probably seeing the blue because of some of the wet years in that hydrology from 91 to 2020. And with CRIMS, the good thing about it is, while it has really good skill in the inflow projections and the storage projections for Powell and Meade in the first couple of years, the skill kind of gets lower as you go into the later years. So what I want you to take away is that, yes, we may be seeing some blue, but it's most likely with the dry conditions that we have, that we may kind of stay in that red and hopefully not go into black. So we probably will likely stay in the red or the mid-elevation release tier in Lake Powell. So let's go to the next slide, please. So the same message here, right? Like black is really bad. That's tier 3 conditions, like below tier 3 conditions. And then yellow is not also good. Blue is excellent. That's when you start to get like the surplus water. As far as the drought contingency plan shortages are concerned, it looks like we likely will be in a tier 1 shortage in 2023 as well. As per all the agreements that we have signed, that means, or for the internal state of Arizona, we start to taper off, and I'll kind of go into that detail a little bit here. But talking about the 5-year projections, it looks like we'll be in a tier 1 shortage in 2023. There is a likelihood that we might go into a tier 2B shortage when we start to take deeper reductions, and California starts to take deeper reductions. And we are starting to see that black, which we don't want to see. That means we'll be below 1025 in the later years. Again, I'm just hoping that we kind of stay in the yellow or the light yellows, or even start to go into blues at some point. But as of now, with dry conditions, it doesn't look likely. We are starting to see like really dry conditions going forward. Next slide, please. Yeah, click once more, maybe one more time. Yes, thank you. So as far as the DCP is concerned, or the drought contingency plan, and the agreements that we have signed within the state of Arizona, because we will be in a tier 1 shortage, most likely in 2023, we start tapering off. So the plan was that we share the pain, right? So we start tapering off, and the parties that are impacted by the DCP reductions get mitigated to a 75% in a tier 1 and a tier 2A, and it tapers off further if we fall into a tier 2B. In 2023, Central Arizona agriculture is not mitigated with CAP water, and they will be completely reliant on groundwater, which was financially supported by the Ag Efficiency Fund and also some monies that were contributed by the Central Arizona Project. So essentially, Central Arizona Agriculture does not get any CAP water flowing through to it. And as far as the DCP mitigation, it starts to taper down. So let's go to the next slide. And you all probably know this, but who would be impacted at tier 1? I only put the tier 1 and tier 2 because that's the most likely tier shortages. So current projections indicate, I mean, as of the March 24-month study, we are at 1049.6. So that is a tier 2A shortage. In the February, it was showing at 1050.26. So the difference there is we had very dry January and February. So what happened was meat started to release a little bit more volume of water than was anticipated. So it has caused meat to kind of go down by a foot. So you are seeing that in the projections as well. So there's a difference of a foot between the February 24-month study projection and the March 24-month study projection. So if we are in a tier 1 shortage, you'll see the same impact that you're seeing in the bar that's on the left side. So most of the NIA is impacted. And if you go into a tier, the ag pool is completely wiped out in a tier 1. And of course, we have not been supplying excess water in a long time. In a tier 2 shortage, NIA pool is again mostly impacted, almost getting wiped out. And of course, ag pool and excess water, all of that is completely wiped out as well. We don't think it may impact the Indian priority pool or the MNI. We would start to see that impact if we start to fall into a tier 2B shortage. So the shortage volume definitely increases from tier 1 to tier 2A by about 80,000 acre feet. With that, let's go to the next slide. So with all of that background, what are we doing now? So as I told you, we have been working on these agreements to conserve more water. We're working with on-river folks to start some following programs so we can conserve additional water when they need. The other thing we have been doing is preparing to develop Colorado River guidelines past 2026. So the 2007 guidelines, they expire. So we need to have operational guidelines for both Powell and Meade after that. So we've been working on that. We expect that reclamation will likely start that process in early next year. And also with the dry climate that I've showed you and that we have been experiencing, we're also looking at innovative ways to augment, conserve, reuse, recycle, and recover. If you have been following the CAP board projects, we have been partnering with NDRIP to bring in more ag efficiency programs into Central Arizona and also along the Colorado River. We are also starting to work with some of the California farmers as well. So essentially, we are just trying to move on, trying to come up with new ideas, trying to see how we can adjust the demand part of the equation to kind of fight against the supply reductions that we have been seeing with the dry climates. So let's go to the next slide. As you may have seen, to help Arizona prepare for a position on the renegotiation of the guidelines, the director has stood up a reconsultation committee with the modeling and analysis work group and the strategy team as advisory committees. These groups have met a few times over the last years. I just want to caution that the next MOG meeting is not on May 13th. I wasn't able to delete it for some reason, but hopefully we should have a new date up soon. We are working through some of scenario planning and so on right now. All of the information and all of the presentations that we have worked through for the MOG and also for the ARC is stored in our websites. And if you go to the next slide. Jackie, could we go to the next slide, please? So, yeah. Oh no, the next slide. Let's not talk about this. No, the next one. One more. Yes. So I am not going to stop on the slide before because I've essentially talked about it, because as we start to work through the reconsultation process, we'll be working with the tribes, we will be working with the other basin states, we'll be working with Mexico, we'll be working with all of our stakeholders to come up with a position for Arizona and to ensure we are able to somehow resolve the mass balance issue that we have been seeing. But all of the information that I presented here and all of the information that we have passed through the modeling and analysis work group, through the Arizona Reconsultation Committee, a lot of the information with the drought contingency plan, all of that is available to you to look at, to review, to question, it's all in the CAP website, the DWR website, and also the US Bureau of Reclamation. With the 24-month studies, it's a model that Reclamation runs every month. The 5-year projections like twice a year. So all of this information is very well presented by all the 3 agencies. So with that, I'll go on to the next slide, and that's really all I have. And we can open up to questions, Jackie, if anyone has any.
Great, thank you. And then yes, please unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have.
I had a question for Vanita, if I may.
Is that Mike?
No, this is Brian.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Brian. Sorry, I can't tell
Sorry,
you.
this is Brian Radford. I'm actually running for legislature, so this is very important to me. But when you mentioned agriculture, part of my area is Pinal County. And we know Pinal County uses a lot of the water for the cotton fields, and there's different agriculture. And you said that they're working on some improvements on way to do that. Can you talk a little bit more detail of what you guys are actually working on with the ag producers?
Yes, absolutely. So we have partnered with a program called NDRIP, like the letter N, NDRIP. And it's a company from Israel. So they have come up with an innovative technology. It basically, it's a system, it's a gravity-fed system that we have actually worked with some of the Pinal County farmers and also with Maricopa County with Perry Farms in Harquahala. And currently we're also working with the Colorado River Indian tribes along the river. So it basically uses a gravity-fed system to enable plants to use less water than it was using. So it essentially senses exactly how much that plant needs to survive, to nurture, and also to produce a better harvest. So we have found a lot of success within Central Arizona in Pinal and also in Maricopa County, and also with the CRIT. We've been growing cotton, some alfalfa, citrus, some vayule, and also some milo. So all of those have seen anywhere between 40 to 60% reduction in their water use. So we're basically working on ag efficiency programs with the farmers to reduce water use. And that essentially is what we are planning to also implement on the on-river folks. We are working on a plan going forward to also bring additional efficiency programs like that. And the other thing, Brian, that I also mentioned is an agreement that we signed back in 2019. It was the legislature approved an ag irrigation and efficiency fund, and it provided funding to farmers to improve ag efficiency and also to produce almost 70,000 acre feet of water through groundwater. So that's was a part of the DCP agreement. So there are 2 actions we are taking to help the Pinal County agriculture.
Yeah, okay, excellent. All right, thank you.
Vanitha, this is Guy Carpenter. I don't know what's been talked about relative to Lake Powell lately. I know that a lot of environmentalists in particular would like to see Glen Canyon go away. I think that Lake Powell, there's been a lot of controversy about Lake Powell ever since it was built, but now that we're really dealing with what we're dealing with here, has it come up to talk about what kind of water savings would be available from not having all of that water evaporate out of Lake Powell every year and just allow the water to flow into Lake Mead? I think it was originally built to deal with distrust between the upper basin and the lower basin, and it seems like a lot of that could be solved otherwise. But has that come up at all in the last few years about taking Glen Canyon Dam out?
Hi, Guy. It's great to hear your voice. So Lake Powell itself has come up and trying to improve Lake Powell's not capacity, but improve the operations has come up. But definitely taking out Glen Canyon Dam is absolutely not on the plans. It is a really important source of storage for the upper basin. It also produces a lot of hydropower, right? So it's a really good source, especially when we have grayouts and brownouts and blackouts. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's a really good supplemental source of hydropower for a lot of the folks. And also the issue that you have seen recently with Lake Powell is that it recently slipped down to 35.25 over the past couple of weeks. And that causes a lot of problems for hydropower because Lake Powell's power pool is at 34.90. So Glenkinnon Dam or federal government have not had any experience operating Lake Powell in those conditions. So they're working through some of that. If you have been watching the CAP board news, we presented how they adjusted the monthly releases from Lake Powell to ensure Lake Powell doesn't go below 34.90. So you might likely see some of those sort of actions coming up more soon. But so we're working to protect Lake Powell, not so much to take or remove Lake Powell out of the equation at all. It is an important source of storage for both the upper basin states, the lower basin states. City of Page gets its water from Lake Powell. And also there are a lot of environmental restrictions below the Glenkinnon Dam. So I don't think that is a part of the plan at this time, at least.
So you said, I'm sorry, just to clarify, you said it's an important storage for the upper basin. So who besides the city of Page gets withdrawals from it?
So as you know, state of Arizona has also an upper basin allocation of about 50,000 acre feet, right? So the city of Page gets its water from that 50,000 acre feet of water. So city of Page does get its water supply from Lake Powell. And also there are Navajo Nation does use some groundwater resources in the upper basin as well within the state of Arizona.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question from Fred on Mexico regarding desalination. Does CAP have any interest in collaboration with Mexico regarding desal? Same question with California. Fred, yes, there is definitely interest. We actually, as part of the Minute 323, we have a work group called the Desalination Work Group, and we have been working with Mexico to build a desalination plan in the Sea of Cortez and potentially having sort of exchange agreements with Mexico. We haven't worked through all of that. Right now it's through scoping. We have a couple of sites identified. What I can do, Fred, is pass on a board presentation that we did last year. It was an update, I thought, in January 2021 or maybe in March. So we have that presentation. It does have a lot of information, and it's something that I can send to Jackie, and maybe she can pass it along to you. But in short, the answer is yes. California, Nevada, the state of Arizona, and the Federal Bureau of Reclamation, we have been working with Mexico to come up with sort of conservation actions and also desalination with the Republic of Mexico.
Absolutely, I can definitely send that on. Are there any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much, Vinitha. Really appreciate your talk. It was very informative. And thank you everyone for joining, and hope to see you at the AZ Water Conference that's coming up the week of April 12th.
Thank you all.